Nestled in the heart of Fall River, Massachusetts, stands an old, creaky house, a house whose walls seem to whisper secrets, dark and unrelenting. The Lizzie Borden House, an innocuous Victorian structure from the outside, hides within it a history drenched in blood, betrayal, and a mystery that has haunted the town for over 130 years. For some, it's just another piece of Americana. But for those who know the legend, it's a place where the past lingers, where the line between the living and the dead is disturbingly thin. A place where a gruesome crime, unsolved and shrouded in mystery, continues to torment those who dare to enter. The story begins on a scorching hot summer day, August 4th, 1892. The sun blazes down on the quiet town of Fall River. Inside the Borden family home, it's a day like any other. But by the time the sun sets, everything will change. By then, 2 lives will be extinguished, and one of America's most terrifying and perplexing murder mysteries will begin. Andrew Borden, a wealthy but cold-hearted businessman, and his wife Abby, a woman who struggled with the roles of both wife and stepmother, are found gruesomely murdered in their own home, bludgeoned with an axe, and all eyes immediately fall on one person: Lizzie Borden, their 32-year-old daughter. At first glance, Lizzie seems like the last person who could commit such a brutal act. She was well-spoken, calm, and socially respected. Her quiet demeanor didn't match the violence that unfolded. But then strange details began to surface. Lizzie's behavior was nothing like that of a daughter who had just discovered the brutal murders of her parents. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't sobbing uncontrollably. No, she was eerily composed. In fact, she was found in the barn, munching on pears, almost as if she hadn't just witnessed the gruesome deaths of both her father and stepmother. It wasn't until the police arrived that she led them to the crime scene, calmly explaining that she had been upstairs when the murders occurred. But the more they investigated, the more cracks began to appear in her story. As investigators combed through the house, more unsettling details came to light. The murders were savage. An axe was used, striking the victims repeatedly in their skulls. Andrew Borden's face was nearly unrecognizable, his skull shattered by the brutal blows. Abby, too, suffered a horrific fate, her head split open with such force that it sent shockwaves through the entire town. The house was drenched in blood. But amidst the gore, there was something even more chilling: the absence of any sign of a struggle. The victims had not fought back. Whoever had done this was close, too close. Could it have been Lizzie herself? Then came the questions. Questions that would haunt the investigation for decades to come. Why was Lizzie so calm? Why, despite the horror unfolding around her, did she show no sign of panic? The more investigators questioned her, the more her statements seemed to contradict each other. First, she claimed she had been in the attic when the murders occurred. Then, she said she had been in the kitchen. She spoke of seeing a figure outside the house earlier that morning, but no one could corroborate her story. And there was another strange detail that investigators couldn't ignore. Lizzie had been attempting to purchase prussic acid, an extremely poisonous substance, just days before the murders. Could it be that she had planned something darker, something far more sinister? As the investigation continued, the press went wild. The murder of Andrew and Abby Borden was the talk of the town, and rumors about Lizzie's involvement spread like wildfire. Was she an innocent bystander, caught in the wake of a horrific tragedy? Or was she hiding a much darker secret, one that drove her to commit the unthinkable? Some began to speculate about Lizzie's strained relationship with her father. Andrew was wealthy but frugal, and Lizzie had a reputation for being spoiled and temperamental. Was this the motive she needed? Was it the inheritance, the desire for freedom, or something even more personal that drove Lizzie to kill? To make matters more chilling, the murder weapon, a blood-stained axe, was found in the basement. But here's where the story takes another eerie turn. No one could explain why the axe hadn't been cleaned, why it hadn't been hidden. Was it too late for Lizzie to cover her tracks? Or was the killer confident that the evidence wouldn't lead back to them? There were even rumors that Lizzie had tried to clean the blood from the axe before the police arrived, but in a panic had left the weapon in plain sight. The idea that someone could be so calm, so methodical, in the face of such carnage only added to the chilling mystery. Then came the trial. Lizzie Borden was arrested and charged with the brutal murders of her parents. But as the trial unfolded, something even stranger emerged. The prosecution had no solid evidence to convict her. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no confession. In fact, there was almost nothing that definitively pointed to Lizzie. Her defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial, and in the end, the jury agreed. Lizzie Borden was acquitted of all charges, and the question of who truly killed Andrew and Abby Borden remains one of the most debated mysteries in American history. But the story doesn't end there. Even after Lizzie was cleared of all charges, something darker seemed to linger over the house. Could the restless spirits of Andrew and Abby Borden still haunt the property? Over the years, reports of strange occurrences have surfaced. Visitors to the Lizzie Borden house, now a museum and bed and breakfast, often speak of a deep, oppressive sense of unease. There are stories of eerie cold spots, unexplainable sounds, footsteps in empty rooms, whispers that echo through the halls, and doors that creak open on their own. And then there are the reports of a strange presence, as if someone or something is watching, always watching. Some say they've heard the heavy thuds of footsteps in the house, the kind that seem to echo from the very walls. Others claim to have seen shadows darting across rooms, just out of sight, glimpses of figures that shouldn't be there. One of the most disturbing phenomena is the feeling that someone is standing right behind you, breathing down your neck. Could it be the spirits of Andrew and Abby, trapped in the place where their lives were violently taken? Or could it be something else, something far darker, that still lingers in the house, a chilling reminder of the violence that unfolded within these walls? And then there's the most unsettling thought of all. Was Lizzie herself a ghost, still walking the halls of the house she grew up in? Some believe that Lizzie, having committed such a heinous act, is forever bound to the house, unable to escape the consequences of her actions. Others think that perhaps she did not kill her parents, but that the real killer, whoever they may have been, still walks among us, watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. The Lizzie Borden house stands to this day, its walls bearing the weight of the past. Some say it's just a house, a building made of wood, brick and mortar. But for those who have ventured into its dark corners, who have felt the chill of the past creep into their bones, it's far more than that. It's a place where the line between the living and the dead blurs, a place where the past refuses to stay buried. And for those brave enough to walk its halls, it's a chilling reminder that some mysteries may never be solved. In the small, seemingly peaceful town of Atchison, Kansas, stands an innocuous-looking house. A house that, for decades, has been the center of one of the most terrifying and unexplained hauntings in modern history. The Sally House is not just another haunted house. It is a place where the boundary between life and death blurs, and where the very air seems thick with dread. But what makes this house so terrifying? What is the dark secret that lurks behind its old wooden walls? And why do people who dare to enter it leave, forever changed and haunted by what they experience? The story of the Sally House begins with a young couple, Tony and Deborah, who moved into the house in 1993. At the time, they had no idea what they were stepping into. The house, located at 508 North 2nd Street, had all the charm of a quaint Victorian home. But as soon as they settled in, things began to take a sinister turn. What started as strange noises, scratching sounds, knocks, and whispers, soon escalated into something much darker. It was as if the house itself had come alive, with an unseen force growing stronger, feeding off their fear. But it was not just the sounds or eerie feelings that unsettled them. It was the violent physical attacks that began almost immediately. Tony was the first to experience the violence. One night, as he lay in bed, he woke to a sharp pain in his chest. When he turned on the light, he was horrified to see deep scratch marks, as if claws had torn through his skin. But the worst was yet to come. The next night, Tony woke to find himself being physically attacked. His body was slammed into the bed, scratched and bruised. It was as though an invisible force was targeting him, attacking him in his most vulnerable state. He fought to get up, but the entity seemed to have no mercy. He ran to the living room, his body covered in marks, only to find that the dark energy was following him. The couple was terrified. But the worst part was that no one in town, believed them. The entity behind the attacks, they soon discovered, was no ordinary ghost. Tony and Deborah reached out to paranormal investigators, and when they arrived at the house, they encountered something that defied explanation. The house, they reported, was saturated with a malevolent presence, one that seemed to feed off fear and anger. The investigators spoke of a palpable evil that permeated every inch of the house, a dark, suffocating energy that made it impossible to feel comfortable inside. But what was it? Who or what was behind these terrifying attacks? This is when the story of Sally begins to take shape. According to the paranormal investigators, the entity that haunted the house was not just any spirit. They believed it to be a young girl named Sally, who had died in the house long ago. But Sally wasn't the innocent, playful ghost one might expect from a child's spirit. Instead, she was angry and vengeful, an entity that seemed to have a deep connection to the house's dark history. Was Sally trapped here, unable to move on? Or was she something more, an evil force that had been awakened, hungry for attention and for pain? As investigators delved deeper into the history of the house, they uncovered chilling details about its past. Before it was a family home, the house had served as a clinic, a place where medical practices were performed. One theory that emerged was that Sally had been the victim of a botched medical procedure, possibly a failed surgery or even an experimental treatment. Some believed that the spirit of Sally, scarred by her tragic death, became vengeful, turning her once innocent soul into something dark and violent. But there was another theory, one that suggested something far more sinister at play in the Sally house. In addition to Sally, investigators began to uncover signs that the house might be home to something far more dangerous: a demonic presence. Evidence of poltergeist activity intensified. Loud, deafening bangs came from empty rooms. Furniture moved on its own. Items were thrown across the room, smashing against the walls. The physical attacks on Tony escalated to terrifying new levels. One investigator reported being pushed down the stairs, while others experienced violent, unexplained shoves. And then there were the unexplainable whispers, sometimes heard as soft voices, calling out to them from the shadows. The investigators believed they could hear Sally's voice, but it was often distorted, as if a malevolent force was speaking through her. As the activity intensified, Tony and Deborah grew desperate. They contacted various paranormal teams, hoping for answers. The Ghost Adventures crew made a chilling investigation, capturing evidence of the supernatural with their high-tech equipment. But what they discovered went beyond the usual eerie noises. They captured images of shadowy figures darting in and out of sight, caught on infrared cameras. And during a session with the spirit box, they were stunned to hear the voice of a child calling out, "Sally." But was it truly Sally, the little girl? Or was it something darker, a demonic entity pretending to be innocent to gain the trust of its victims? One of the most chilling moments during the Ghost Adventures investigation came when they decided to perform an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, session in the house. As they sat in the dark, a small voice could be heard over their equipment. "Get out!" The voice was chillingly clear. The crew tried to communicate with the spirit of Sally, but the more they probed, the more hostile the spirit became. At one point, the equipment began to malfunction, and an overwhelming sense of dread filled the room. Investigators reported feeling sick, dizzy, and even nauseous. The house, it seemed, was fighting back. Tony's injuries were not the only ones documented. Multiple visitors, including seasoned ghost hunters, were physically attacked inside the Sally house. Some were scratched, others were pushed, and many reported being hit by invisible hands. But there was something far more disturbing that began to happen to those who spent significant time in the house. Visitors who had never believed in the supernatural found themselves haunted by strange dreams, feelings of being watched, and even the sensation of being touched by unseen hands when they left the house. Some experienced vivid nightmares about the house, while others found themselves haunted by the name Sally. The house seemed to attach itself to those who entered it, trapping them in a psychological web of terror. Today, the Sally house still stands, abandoned by its previous owners, but a popular location for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers alike. Those brave enough to enter report a mix of fear and fascination. Some say that the house remains as active as ever, its dark energy palpable and ever-present. There are even reports of a shadowy figure that stands in the windows, peering out at passers-by. Those who have stayed in the house overnight say they can hear faint whispers and footsteps in the darkness, and even claim to have felt something or someone brushing against them. And of course, there are still those who say they feel a presence, the feeling of being watched or, worse, touched by something unseen. But is it Sally, or has the house become a vessel for something much more sinister? No one knows for sure. Some speculate that the demonic entity, using Sally's name as a front, continues to haunt the house. Others believe that Sally, the innocent child, is trapped there, her restless spirit seeking release. One thing is certain, the Sally house is not a place for the faint of heart. Its chilling history, the violent paranormal activity, and the stories of those who have walked away shaken make it one of the most haunted locations in America. Thank you for joining us on this terrifying journey through the haunted old house stories. If you found yourself captivated by these stories, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales from some of the most haunted places in the world. And remember, some houses should never be entered. Some places are best left untouched, their dark secrets best left buried.